Hello there and welcome to this video on arrays. Now arrays are a data structure that's used in lots of different algorithms, and they're quite an easy data structure to get your head around, but you just got to follow a few simple steps. An array at A-level has three distinct parts to it. The first being the name of the array itself, and it looks like a single row table. Now, the identifier, or the name of the array, is what we use to reference all of the individual numbers inside each one of these boxes. And these boxes are called elements. Now, the thing is with arrays, as opposed to lists in Python, is an array can only hold data of one data type. So here you can clearly see I've got integers, whole number, numbers, and that is the only data type that can be held in here. Now each one of these numbers inside the element boxes are referenced via an index. Now these arrays start at 0 and we call them zero-based indexes. So they start at 0, so the first number or the first element in our array can be accessed by putting in the index position 0. And you're going to see this in a minute when we move on to our programming challenge. So for example, if I asked you, what is at my array, bracket, 3, close bracket. Now whatever number goes inside these brackets refers to the index location in the array. So if I said to you my array at the position of 3, then we go to the third position and we recall the number at that position. So, to recap, three distinct parts. The identifier is the name of the array data structure, an element is an individual number from the box, and the index is the location inside my array. And you can call them whatever you want, it doesn't necessarily have to be my array. Now then, let's have a look at this in a practical sense and it'll make a little bit more sense. Here, I want us to create a program which accepts 5 student names and their marks. The program then displays a summary of the marks, including the average, minimum, and the maximum marks. So let's have a look at this in Visual Basic. So here I've got a very simple mock-up of my front end. And we've got one button that says run, and we've got a list box also to display our result at the end. So the first step to this is to allow us to accept 5 student names and their marks into an array. Now if you think about student names, we have strings for people's names and we have marks which are going to be whole numbers. If we just forget about student names for a second, let's just put student marks into an array. Now in Visual Studio, when I click this button, it's going to create an event, and this event will run the code inside here. When I click that button, I'm going to make an array. So just like you would normally make a variable by putting dim my array as integer, okay, that creates a variable for something called my array. Now that's not an array yet. How we denote an array is by putting brackets after it, and you have to specify the size here. Now the question said 5 student marks and 5 student names, so if I put in here 5, how many would that actually produce? Well, element wise that would produce 6 elements in total, and the reason why is because we start from 0, don't forget. So if I start from 0, it's going to be 4. So try and picture that. Element 1 is 0, element 2 is 1, element 3 is 2, element 4 is 3, and element 5 is 4. Hopefully that makes sense. Starting at 0, not 1. So if I wanted to populate these numbers and hard code them, I could say my array, which is the name of your array, at the position of 0 is given the value of, let's pick a number, 23. Okay, so now position 0 or element 0 in your array is going to be assigned the value of 23. I could do that for them all, I suppose. So as you can see there, these all have been hard coded. I am not allowing the user to write these in. I'm going to write them in manually myself. Now that is not really what this question's about, because we're asking the user to enter these things in there. So how would we do that? Well, each one of these could be replaced for some kind of input box maybe from the user. And you could have a question there saying, please enter the marks for student 1. Okay, now you could replace all of them one by one and have all of these with an input box. But again, I'm using lots of repeated code there. It's not very efficient. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a loop. Okay, something that can repeat itself many times because my code would have to repeat itself. So I could say for I equals 0. So I've got a local variable called I. It's going to start at 0. Okay. Then I say 2, 4. All right. So if you think about it, counting from 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, that's going to repeat exactly 5 times. Okay. So this is going to loop 5 times. And all I need to do here then is say my array at the position of I. So why is it I? Well, the first iteration or the first pass through my loop is going to be 0 because I is set to 0 on the first pass. Then when we hit next, I increments to 1. And because it's still inside the range, it continues. So I is 1, then it becomes 2, then it becomes 3, then it becomes 4, and then it stops. So my array at the position of I is given the value of whatever the user asks. Now, obviously, student 1, it would just say student 1 every time, wouldn't it? So let me show you exactly what that's doing. Run my program. And here we go. I click run, and it will say, please enter the marks for student 1. So this is when I is equal to 0, and I type in there 33. Then, really, that should say 2 now, but it doesn't. It still says 1. So this is actually putting it in position 1. So I type in another number there. So that's 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, and it stops. Perfect. The loop works, but the display is slightly off. So all I need to do is remove 1 here, and instead of using that, I can use I as a counter. So now, when I run my program, it will say, please enter the marks for student 0. Student 0? That's not very good. We don't really have student 0. So, again, go back in, and I just trial and error, just adjust it, I plus 1, run this again. And here we are, run. So now it says, please enter the marks for student 1. So let's type in 21, then it changes, that's good. 18, 34, 44, and 32 for student 5, and it finishes. Perfect. So we've managed to do the first part of the algorithm that says enter all the student grades into the array. Now let me show you what the array looks like when we add that in. Let's see if it does actually populate. And all I'm doing here is I'm just using a breakpoint on line 14. So this little margin down here allows us to put in breakpoints on our code lines, and that means we'll stop the program when it hits that line. So start my algorithm again, click run, and it stops at this line. And it's telling you down here in your autos box that the array has a length of 5. And currently, there is nothing in there. Zeros by default in all of my number positions. So if I step into, at the top here, I'll press F11, it will go over, and I am carrying out debugging here. It's a very good tool to use to see what your code is doing. I'll type in 21, I click OK, and now you can see 21 is there. 21 has been placed in position 0. So let's see what happens when I move on, step into it again, and again, enter for number 2, that's 18, I click OK, and now what you'll see is in position 1, 18's been placed in there. And as I run through this code, all of these will be populated, so I'm happy that my array is actually getting populated at this point. And as we've done so much in the first part of this video, if you join me in the second part, we'll go through how to output the array. We'll go through the averages, minimums and maximums using our array. So I'll see you over there for part 2.